Looks like this guy had to get this game off his chest. It does feel like that a little, yeah. It was a very personal game. I mean, I feel like it was written from the heart. It was so incredibly fragmented at the beginning that it's really hard to follow. And I don't think it's bad, or like, I completely relate to anybody that says like they weren't a fan of this or like they didn't get it, because I kind of didn't get it either, but I also did. Like, I think I just got the themes of it, which kind of overrode some of the off-kilter delivery mechanisms. I feel like if this was tuned up the right way, there's like a masterpiece somewhere in this concept. Right now, it's like maybe a 5.5 out of 10 in the presentation value, which is unfortunate, but the underlying message here is really solid. It needs to cut away a lot of stuff and really streamline a lot of stuff in a way that I think would make this a lot more effective, and perhaps hook people in an earlier point to make them really engaged the whole way through. So I feel like the abandonment rate of this would probably be fairly high, unfortunately, which is a huge disservice to the ending. I mean, it should be seen through to the end. It was very heartwarming in a weird way. I have a lot of thinking to do about this one before I can really talk about it. If somebody asked me, what did you think of this game? Like, I'd be like, very little to be able to discuss here, unless we have an open dialogue about it. Main idea is accepting death. Right, I think that's true. It's a large, very rough diamond, yeah. Memento Mori, mates, yeah. It is that. I mean, it's literally telegraphed from the title screen, so yeah, that's not surprising. The game part of it was horrible, but I still like the experience. It was pleasant in a weird sort of way. Yeah. I wonder what the hell Mathis thought about this, because he apparently did like a Let's Play. I don't know if he finished it, though. Also, when I read reviews on this, I read that somebody said they took 5 hours to play this. Like, how are you going to get another hour and a half more out of this? Because I played it for 3.5. It's like, there wasn't that much more to do, unless you just took a really long time walking around the landscapes, which I guess is possible. Looking for all the side stuff. I enjoyed watching it, but I would have hated playing it. Yeah, that's fair enough. I didn't love most of playing it as well, but I did love that I got through it and I enjoyed the themes of it by the end. It was fairly, standard. I mean, there was a lot of hopping and jetpacking and such, and clicking on things. You know what sucked too is there were so many little things, little nitpicky things that I think would have really helped the experience right from the first moment. Like, when I was first presented with the text box that disappeared before I could finish reading it, I was already like, alright, I'm starting to be frustrated, nothing's even really happened yet. Also, the text being white, sometimes on a white background, in a font that is not readable, but like the positioning of it and the typesetting of it wasn't ideal. And if you're going to have so many elements that need to be read, it's important that that needs to be sorted out early on. I mean, you need to make an early and good impression when it comes to exposition elements like that, especially if you're going to potentially lose people later on over other things that are sort of subjective art trope things that might or might not trigger certain people to stay or not stay. And when your gameplay loop is essentially hopping around a world and being berated by a robot, like, that's going to alienate some of your audience, obviously. There's going to be people that are going to go, I'm not into this. I don't want to listen to this robot yelling at me anymore. I don't really care what the story is. So I think you've got to do every possible thing to, like, put your best foot forward when it comes to presentation, UI, and things like that if you want to get through to more people, which I would hope the aspiration is, because I feel that there are reasons that this game should have penetrated to a larger demographic. It's frustrating sometimes when it's like, you just see all this potential in things, and it's like, well, if I could have just told them, it's like, but it's not up to me. It's not my project. I don't know. I just want everybody to get everything to the best way that I feel like I understand it can be done, and that's also a little self-serving of me and egotistical, but interesting. It's an interesting thing. Thank you also, Jemmy, by the way, for just gifting me Undertale. I saw you guys talking about it ad nauseum in the chat, and I did not have a copy of it. I was not necessarily planning on streaming it reasonably soon, but I did intend to play it eventually. Maybe when I get back from Ireland or something, that could be a thing to do. But thank you very much, Jemmy. It was very kind of you to do that, and I am interested in seeing it. People won't stop talking about how good it is, so I now have that game. Thank you very much. Not a fan of the bitchy robot, especially with how passive aggressive it comes off. And I agree, but also I think that thematically there was probably a reason for it. I just didn't totally put all the pieces together enough to know. So, like, I don't want to second guess the developer. I'm sure there was some reason behind it. The mission started real and he was okay. When he started to think that maybe he was not coming home, that's when shit went down and we got pizza and stuff. That was the second mission, though, that we saw the pizza. You need to play it without seeing anything about it. Well, I haven't seen anything about it really at all, other than a couple of screenshots and like millions of people praising it. Not actually millions, but many people praising it. I will try to avoid spoilers, though. I think it's much easier to make the same theme seem pretentious in a game than in a movie or novel. I don't like that it's true, but it seems true. Pretty sure the reason behind AVA was just so there's someone talking to you so that you didn't get bored while playing. To a small degree, yes, to keep you like immediately engaged from moment to moment, yes, but also I think that they were trying to feed you emotional leads and take you different places with it. I think that's a valid way to do it. It's just there was no escaping the nagging of your conscience. Maybe that's all it was, though. It really was the nagging of your conscience, and you wanted to get away from it as a player, which actually, if that is the message that was intended to be received, that's actually kind of cool. It's frustrating when you're in the moment, yes, but it's also kind of cool from a secondary perspective if you're looking at this from a critique-oriented direction, you know? I wonder why they were so heavy-handed about the family thing at the beginning. Yeah, I don't know that either. They really oversold the family element. That's sort of like the expectation, I think, that people would miss their family. I don't think you really have to sell that very hard. It could just have been, being in the, what's the word, when you're in the echo chamber of creating something where you just kind of can't see from an external perspective, and maybe everyone is just so invested in this, mission, this message, this narrative, that some things just end up a little weird from the outside perspective, and maybe that's something that just could be easily tuned. AVA was your consciousness. The hard part I had was delineating between what was real and what was not. The weird shit started happening from the start, so I didn't get a base sense of what concrete things... Right, yeah, I think maybe the pacing could have been a little bit different as well. Moving back some of the hallucination stuff, like one more planet, letting us have a little bit of framework to reality before we really get off track. I think that makes sense. It almost seemed like the developer was seeing the player take a longer amount of time in the first area, or that more exposition would have happened there to make the passage of time make more sense with a linear progression of exposition later. What I'm trying to say is that the balance was probably a bit off for what elements occurred when. I'm pretty sure the family thing was supposed to feel heavy-handed. It was the corporation delivering a heavy-handed message, not the developer. Maybe. Yeah, I'd like to know if any of what we see is real. How did he actually die? Yeah, I don't know. Does your PS4 triggers still make that squeaky sound? No, I put a tiny drop of WD-40 on the end of a Q-tip, and I rubbed it on the back of the triggers, and it's been fixed ever since. That was like a year ago. It definitely seems like the game was self-aware about the heavy-handed family thing. Plus low oxygen makes you hallucinate. Yeah. It was very dreamy and very ethereal. I grant them that for sure. I think he was in a coma all along. Well, then this would be a perfect companion with Coma Ecliptic, the most recent Between the Buried and Me album. I think he did run out of air. The suit cracked at the end, I thought. Yeah, it's possible. You are now a corpse of discovery. Yeah. Oh, no problem, Jemmy, and I'm sorry you're not feeling well. I hope you feel better. Thanks for watching. The first planet was real, but the other planets were a part of the mind. I mean, that would explain why they were all so, like, freaking weird, right? There was a drastic departure from the things that happened in the first one. You know, mostly kind of flat, craggy, orange, solar flare filled, like, radiation and storms. And then we get to the second planet, it's like lush green, crazy alien life, and then all kinds of things that make almost no sense. The whole. Okay, so here's the next idea I have then. You're right. The whole story took place on his final mission, which was the first mission and only mission, and every other part of the story was parts integrated of a sort of redundancy looping of his mind, working through the ideas that he had taken from his messages from his family that all occurred before he went out on that final mission. Which explains why all of those things were integrated, right? All of those things his family said, the things about the space whales and the fish and the animals that they saw, the rhino and the giraffe, like those are all literally things that we saw, as well as memories that he had throughout his life. Preferences. He said he had a thing for blended coffee drinks. Thank you very much, Smite TV, for the host. And then all of these things were showing up in the reality as he leapt through the exposition of him accepting death little by little. When did the death moths appear? At the very end of the first mission, which, yeah, I think that's what the story is. The first time you saw one of those was at the end of the first mission. They were looming around, and then one just got me out of nowhere, even though I was nowhere near running out of stamina or health. Yeah, I think the death monsters may have just been death, but I also would not be super surprised if some of the paradox stuff that we talked about could have come into play somehow. There's two drastically different readings, I guess, that you could take from this. I think the one I just said is probably way more likely, but the other one almost seems like everything could support that as well. And it was his life flashing before his eyes in a really distorted, hallucinatory way as he was trying to piece together how he could escape this feeling of being about to die. Like, his final discovery was like, how do I get out of being trapped in this? I guess, because he doesn't know, like, what's going on. If he's running out of oxygen, he doesn't know that he's about to die. He just thinks he's trapped in all of these various exotic worlds. You think that makes sense? I feel pretty content with the secondary reading, or the one that I just said. That the only real one was the first mission, and all of the subsequent final missions were a collaboration of distorted memories leading up to that final mission. But I lean towards the all but the first were mental reading, yeah. Oh, yeah, I see the two readings method. Some or all of missions were hallucinated, repeats of his last experience, but I lean towards the all but the first were mental reading. What's really incredible though is that like I could not penetrate that concept that that's maybe what was happening until after I'd seen the entire thing. I was really having trouble reading what direction the story was trying to take me, and it was not clear, which maybe was part of the mystique of the whole thing. I don't know. It was intentionally obtuse for a long time. And maybe we just went on to the red herring of the paradox thing because it seemed convenient at the time, but it might have just been wrong. I don't know. Is that how you accept death, though? I don't think it's necessarily about the way you would literally accept death, but it could have been the metaphorical way that he ended up accepting death when he was oxygen starved and his brain was doing contortions to try and get itself out of the, the horrible precarious situation that it was in, whether that be live or die. It didn't care. It needed out. Yeah, no problem, Megiano. Thanks for being here. I mean, alternative is he kept doing grander things, discovering rare materials, alien life, alien civilization, and finally creating all life by panspermia. Right. That's so egotistical. Yeah, but the other thing is, like, as we kept going back to the various places in our lander area, or the shuttle, or whatever you want to call it, the place he started every single time, his living quarters, every time we would go back, he seemed more and more fatalistic about the whole thing as we were getting closer and closer to death, and things kept falling and falling apart. The more we progressed through the worlds, the more distorted things got, and the more chaotic they got, which is just grander instability. I think that makes sense. If the different planets are like different stages of grief, the paradox thing I think would be denial. Trying to think of something that's happening other than death. He didn't know that he was dying. When he met death, he realized and accepted that. Yeah, exactly. I don't think he knew he was dying, which you wouldn't if you're oxygen starved. You just go into a really confused state. That's just how it goes. And, well, I guess if you were freezing cold, that's the one time I think people feel comforted by death, but usually it's just sort of like you're just waiting, or kind of in limbo state, waiting for it to kind of figure out a way through. He creates a place where he can accept death in his own way. Right, and even if it was just for our viewing pleasure that took place, like, it still could be indicative of a deeper subconscious musing, perhaps. I think this is, like, way more interesting to talk about than it is to actually play, as weird as that sounds. But I really like the concepts behind it, and it was really quite touching, and I've been talking for, like, an hour now about the ending. What a weird freaking game. For real. But still, how would you accept death when all you're worried about is how you miss your family and children growing up? Well, that's the thing. I think eventually they sort of faded away, which, as you remember, the last message was his daughter singing a song to him, which, the messages never got pleading or anything. They were always sort of, like, on a level that his mind could relate to without panicking or being in an anxiety-ridden state. The messages from his wife were always very calm, actually. Even though they were filled with sorrow, they weren't discordant or strident or accusatory, which I believe would not necessarily comport with the reality of the situation, necessarily. Like, if you... And it also didn't make sense, because they said they lost contact with him, and yet the messages were still getting through. So right there's a disconnect that I think kind of tells you this is happening in his head. But his wife never panicked, right? Like, she was always kind of just like, well, we miss you a lot. We hope you'll come back. She was morose, but she never did the whole, like, freaked out and was like, I can't stand that. I don't know what's happening to you. Like, I can't handle this. I'm breaking down over this. Which is a thing that a mind would never want to project. It's only something you would receive, right? Like, you would never make up someone yelling at you like that, because you don't want to receive that information because of all the guilt that would come with it. So I think his mind was creating projections that would alleviate some of the stresses that he was feeling, but still felt realistic or based in something. He may have even died in the crash in the first mission. AVA remarks how she doesn't know how he got out of the wreck. Right. Messages were getting there while he was sleeping, flying to the destination. When he deviated, the family sent the last ones, then he crashed. Maybe. Maybe I'm totally misreading this. I don't know, it seems logical in my mind, but I also might just be on, or totally off on it, I don't know. But it's okay, I mean, I like that we can have this kind of discussion and go off in a few different directions about it. In some ways, that gives it a lot more mystique. It makes it much more interesting to have talks about. Otherwise, if it was just a literal reading, there would be very little interpretation and very little to talk about. Anyone wonder why they bothered with the intro cinematic new report? It was a little apart from the feeling of the rest of the game. Yeah. It did seem to kind of want to really throw you off there, didn't it? Maybe just because they wanted to throw you into this vibe of the core, right? Like that it was official somehow, so they wanted to give you some sort of baseline of what you might see as something official. Well, it takes a long time possibly to send messages, so the first few messages were just talking about what is happening to the family. The later missions, though they suspected that he was dead but weren't sure. Actually forgot about the cinematic. They straight tell you that an astronaut died. Oh, really? I forgot. You want to see the cinematic again, just so we can recap it? Might as well.
Look, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here promptly. Now, let me just say a few things, and then I'll answer some questions for you. Look, we've just confirmed the unfortunate news that we have lost contact with one of our astronauts. Out of respect of his loving family, we aren't disclosing a name yet. We will continue to do everything possible to better understand this situation.
Can you say what went wrong?
Look, the corpse of Discovery have had a nearly perfect track record of safety. We believe he came out of stasis and the shuttle reached the planet, but we don't have a landing status. Yes.
Can a rescue shuttle be dispatched?
Look, I can't really get into that, but it isn't as simple as just sending a shuttle from one of the nearby space stations. The Major was aware of the risks and would respect the rescue protocol we are following.
Yeah, it's weird that he says corpse like that. The title makes sense. Do you guys, you didn't get that? That it was core of Discovery is the core that we're a part of? We're the Discovery core, but we're also a corpse. It's like, it's kind of a heavy-handed title. They should be equipped with a medical bond. You have a splitting headache.
Major, we trust you have had a successful landing. As you are just here for your final mission, please get down to the main computer to be briefed. Thank you.
There is no rescue protocol. Yeah, well, they said it's not that simple. So immediately on the second mission, a whole bunch of his children's pictures appeared on this wall where they did not exist prior. Which is just, it just strikes me as like, this is a memory. He's putting memories onto things. Never even saw this TV here. Still wanted to sit on this beanbag chair. Free will. What is that? 8 things to do if stuck on a planet. Holy religion. Grimm's fairy tales. Eternal recurrence. Oh my god, are each one of these books one of the iterations? I can't read that other one, the black book. Something one more time. Let's try one more time, it says. A Jonathan Blackwell. What does that one say? Something Moose? Oh, it's the same one over here. I can't see what the title says. Oh, the date. 2116. Oh, wait. Was it 2176? I can't remember how much time has passed. Also, what is this a photo of? It's so creepy. It was 2070 in the last one? It's kind of fun trying to uncover these stories together. I kind of like this part. Recognition of your services, Department of Exploration of the Cores. Your efforts have made the resource efforts in the area fruitful. Without your something and collaborations with Core Discovery Project would not have been a success. Commendation for training. Can you explain what this game is for those who came recently? It's really hard to describe, honestly. We've just spent the last 40 minutes or so trying to even understand what happened in it. Essentially, you're this guy on his final mission for the Core of Discovery, which is this group that goes and discovers things as, like, you know, astronauts that are sort of like groundbreaking explorers, and we go through a bunch of different planets, and it's sort of like a metaphor of coping with death. It's very vague and abstracted and confusing, but also really interesting at the same time. My best recommendation is probably try and watch this when I put it up on YouTube, if you're interested, because you kind of need to see the progression, because it's tough to stick with this game from the beginning. It's very slow, but once you get to the end, it's like, well, that was kind of interesting. We kind of have something to talk about now. Does this go back out to the title screen? Yeah, it does. So if he died of old age, would that mean he died before the game even began and the whole thing is a hallucination? Maybe he was stuck there for his life, didn't die for a while, tore up the base as it got wrecked, and the outside portions were just dying. I don't know. I think it's more likely that it was part of his mind, and maybe his mind just changed the date. I wonder how different that one would have been if you would have chosen to analyze the data instead of trying to get the ship parts. I wonder that too, but I have a feeling it wouldn't have been drastically different. It feels like one of those games that gives the illusion of choice, but just kind of loops back in. Alright, I'm going to wrap up the stream. That was a weird stream, but I liked it at the same time, and I'm really happy that I could share this with you.